Good day. My name is Akhona Phokomela. I am in Business Risk Services at SNG Grant Thornton. Today, I am in conversation with Peter Roos, who is a techie that has worn many hats in industry and has worked across all lines of defense. And our topic today is on combined assurance. And Peter today is going to be wearing his combined assurance hat. Peter, welcome, and thank you so much for availing yourself and having this conversation with us.
Thank you, Akhona. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. So combined assurance is not a new term, Peter. It's been around for many, many years, and organizations are at various maturity stages when it comes to combined assurance, and they have actually defined it. It's called many names. Some refer to it as aligned assurance. Some refer to it as combined assurance. Some refer to it as coordinated assurance. And I suppose the stumbling block that most organization has is actually getting past the baseline. So our starting point, like for our conversation, is perhaps to get your commentary in terms of what it really is and what are the artifacts that are important to actually get to that level of maturity that most organizations are actually looking for.
I think anybody who's tried to do this before would realize that it's much more difficult than it sounds. One thing to read King or the I standards and then think I'll build a framework and I'll get the smartest people money can buy and I'll do all sorts of things. But in practice, I've learned that this boils down to turn the top, seeing the senior executives in the organization leading this, having this conversation, participating in it at all the lines of defense across all levels of the organization, and the culture, because where there's a respect for GRC and the assurance over that in particular, it becomes a much easier exercise. Successful combined assurance, what that looks like is a culture that's supportive of this, plus good collaboration. The other things tend to follow. So you do need policy, you need standards, you need the smart people, you need the frameworks and the methodologies and all of those things. But all of that can't spawn nothing if you don't have what I call the coalition of the willing. So you need to start with the people who really want to make this happen. And the most important people in that would be your leadership. If this is something that the leadership across the organization support and something that they actively participate in, people tend to follow. If this is something that's not structure and bureaucracy driven, but that actually demonstrates and becomes, I would say, more conversational, becomes part of your ways of work. It's not an add-on. It's not something that you're coerced into doing. If the value is there, if this becomes part of culture and the leadership live this, then you will see success.
That is quite an important and very powerful statement to make, Peter, because sometimes we overlook the value of being able to collaborate and that coalition, and also the culture plays a very important piece. So what I wanted to ask is that how do we get it on board? Because we always talk about like buy-in, and that buy-in, like if you look at it in a practical sense, it's just not easy. And based on your experience, what are the practical methods that you've applied in order to get that buy-in from those senior people?
Ideally, it's led by the senior people. Ideally, it's something that they want and that they want to drive across the organization. It becomes more difficult with any change management exercise when you need to do this bottom up, because it's something you have to sell. It's something you have to convince the leadership. You need to build a value proposition around this. And all of that becomes much more difficult than something that is leadership led. And that goes back to culture. So ideally, you shouldn't have to convince your leadership that this is a good thing, because then you have a culture problem for a start. In an organization where leadership say good governance, risk management, control is central to our success, It's central to us achieving our objectives, and we want to make our assurance work count. That becomes easier. If you have to build a business case around this, you will go to things like a reduction in duplication of the audit effort. Some organizations try and reduce the external audit fee. Well, that's not something that I found to be especially good a driver in my experience. But if it's about cutting costs and saving money, you've got less of a chance of succeeding, but you can build a business case around that because you do reduce duplication. You do reduce wasted effort. You can actually reduce the volume of your assurance work in a large organization where you've got hundreds or even thousands of assurance reviews in a year. If you cut the waste on that, there's a monetary saving in itself. But I would say start with a culture. If you have a culture problem, this thing's going to have difficulty flying. If there's no respect for GRC, if there's no respect for the assurance process and the value of assurance, it's going to be very difficult to make this stick. Then it becomes an aggregation effort where you crunch spreadsheets and you try and prove a point to the audit committee, which doesn't really achieve much.
And speaking of money and spreadsheets, Peter, so most of our clients, and I would say like across industry, money does actually become a bit of a challenge in terms of like budget. How do we overcome that? Because most of our stakeholders, the comments that we get is that senior management needs to see value before we can actually put money on it. And what would your comments be when it actually comes to the money aspect?
I actually have good news for them because this is not about money. You can achieve success in combined assurance without throwing money at it. And in fact, you can save money. If you do this for the right reason and you get people to cooperate, the efficiencies would probably pay for itself. You don't start off combined assurance by hiring 50 consultants that you need to pay to build your frameworks. You don't build systems for a start. At the outset, this is about getting people to do the right things for the right reason. And that's good for an organization itself. That doesn't cost money. Good culture doesn't necessarily cost money. If you have a very bad culture and you need to change it, and you need to restructure to fix the culture, that costs money. But that's not about combined assurance. That's about the fabric of the organization in the first place. So success in combined assurance you can achieve without throwing additional money at that. That's a bold statement, I know, and most executives wouldn't expect anybody to say that. What you would do well is to invest in a handful of really good consultants that can drive the change across the organization. If you need people educated on what combined assurance entails, if you need assistance to close the culture gap, to lay the foundation for good combined assurance, that is where you might want to spend money. But anybody who says we don't have the money for combined assurance doesn't understand what's at stake. So hire the good consultant or two to come and explain this to you, and you will probably fund that consultancy work from the savings. The money you spend comes later in the process. Once you've got a working combined assurance process, you realize that you need one plan. You can't waste people's time by sitting around large desks and aggregating spreadsheets. That's a massive waste of time and money in itself. So the money that you do invest comes later down the line. You might want to improve your methodologies and frameworks, so you'll spend a bit of money on that potentially. But the largest investment in monetary terms comes much further down the track when you start building the systems to support a single plan across all the lines of defense across the entire organization, to enable one issue management process, to enable the tracking of the audit plan at scale. If you have 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 engagements on your combined assurance plan, you're not going to be able to track that if you don't have a single platform. That is where the monetary investment comes, but that's way down the track. You don't spend a lot of money early in the process, and hopefully that's good news.
It's definitely good news. And I want to touch on, because it's very key, because in terms of combined assurance, it is about that one voice and one view of risk. And that single platform, as you've touched, is the key to actually bringing it all together. So are there any in industry platforms that are there that one could actually buy off the shelf? Because I understand that, I mean, it is a journey. How do you practically now move like from the spreadsheet and into that platform?
Yes, that's a good question. I haven't seen anything in the industry that's fit for purpose. I know all the companies will come after me and say, but we've got this fantastic platform for your work papers or your issue management or your analytics. We can give you robots to automate stuff. That's all good and well, but your challenge is that in large organizations, different lines of defense have different assurance teams. They use different systems. I think it will be rare to find organizations where only one technology is adopted, large organizations, I mean. So what you need is you need to source all of the planning, all of the issue management, all of the assurance data across those different platforms and get into one place. So it becomes more of a data exercise than a system. So having one platform, having one data platform that combines all of your planning into a single plan that you can track, that combines all of your issues and actions into a single platform, that is probably what you're going to have to build. And that will require internal effort. Because as much as people will tell you they've got the solution to this, I'm still waiting to see that, and I'm open to conviction, but I haven't seen that in the industry yet.
There's definitely scope where that is concerned, Peter.
Absolutely.
So bringing it back then home, because it is Internal Audit Month after all, the IIA has actually issued and published the new global internal audit standards, and combined assurance has become very prominent in terms of what is required of chief audit executives and internal audit when it comes to combined assurance. So I'd like to hear from you, sitting on the second line of defense, what is it that internal audit could do to make sure that they support this journey? Yes, it is there in terms of like the textbook. The things that we need to be able to do is like placing reliance. But as one of the participants of like combined assurance, what do you feel is the value proposition for internal audits when it comes to combined assurance?
First of all, I'm excited that the IA has brought combined assurance as a concept into the standards. That's a step forward as far as I'm concerned. And then there's the R word that you use that internal auditors typically shy away from, because the standards talk to this. The quality of the work in the second line is not always conducive to reliance. It has to be earned as well. So it's one thing to call for it, as I would as a second line stakeholder. I would like internal audit to rely on the work of the compliance function, of the risk function, of the second line control functions. But that necessitates good quality assurance work to be produced in the first instance, be that in the second or the first line. So the new standards do open the door in a big way for reliance. It actually talks to that extensively. There's a whole section in it, as far as I can recall. And it kind of challenges the chief audit executive to find reasons not to rely. The reason not to rely would typically be quality. But if you are adopting combined assurance, it's no longer something we can shy away from. We actually need to have a debate to say what are the grounds, what are the prerequisites for reliance, and then that's something we need to work towards. Because if it is combined and not siloed assurance, if it's not aggregated assurance where we just throw together spreadsheets, it implies a much closer working relationship. And that's not a bad thing, and it's not a dangerous thing. Independence and objectivity doesn't rely us not independence and objectivity do not require us not to rely on one another's work. In fact, it brings us closer together. It actually drives closer conversation, and it allows us to really start connecting the dots.
I definitely agree. Sitting on the other side as an internal auditor, I am actually even taking notes for myself, like Peter. There is really scope for all of us to actually work together and collaborate on this journey when it actually comes to combined assurance. So I think as then the closing note, based on your experience, in one word, how would you describe like internal audit? And maybe as your closing remarks, like the tips maybe you can give us as internal auditors.
Well, I would describe internal audit as essential to the effective control environment in any organization. Internal audit provides that objective lens, that independent lens, as the final line of assurance, as far as I'm concerned. If you look at it internally, at the lines of defense model, that actually holds a line to show you what the true state of the control environment is. Internal audit is the voice of reason that actually should call people to account when they see any degradation in the control environment. But internal audit is also a key contributor and should be a key collaborator in the combined assurance process, whether it's an organization where internal audit leads combined assurance, and there are many good examples of that globally. In South Africa, in many organizations, combined assurance is led from the second line. But internationally, there are many good examples where internal auditors lead the whole combined assurance conversation. And that's not a bad thing. So as far as I'm concerned, internal auditors are key to an effective control environment.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And there is something here for everyone, whether they're sitting on the first line, second line, as well as third line. And for me, I'm very excited that I'm sitting at a third line of defense, that I can have like this open conversation with you. And the more conversations we have, the more we can actually continue to contribute towards the combined assurance journey. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter. And I hope everyone is going to enjoy this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Akhona. This was quite enjoyable.